Narcissism is a coping mechanism that creates situations, attention, admiration, etc. in order to bolster a false self that protects the person with the disorder from the underlying serious unresolved issues. Instead of attempting to look at and address these issues, often because this process would be overwhelming to them, they have learned to create this attention with various techniques. Any attention is good attention to the narcissist, and also often in business, where the term any publicity is good publicity, because ultimately it still draws the eye to the desired direction. Usually for a person, certain kinds of attention would be counterproductive or even damaging, but the narcissistic individual has a highly developed process of reframing, which for them conveniently converts any attention, including negative attention, into validation and positive, false self-supporting attention. They convince themselves that negative feedback is only actually jealousy or admiration of their grandiose selves in disguise, or some other usually quite elaborate and self-deceiving beliefs the narcissist has of people who negatively respond to them. This is why the only way to take revenge on a narcissist, which in normal terms would mean to hurt or upset them in some way, is to show indifference. Their reframing process struggles with this, and it taps into their deep feelings of inadequacy, inferiority and shame. It gets past their defences, even though at first they will try and reframe it as you punishing them for a while, but if you persist and continue with no contact, they will have no defence or convenient excuse for this and subsequently suffer a narcissistic injury as a consequence. So people who make narcissist videos, including myself, mostly in the beginning due to having been a target of a narcissist in some way and thus being exposed to their damaging abuse, often follow a path that leads to a form of narcissism in itself. People who have been targeted by highly narcissistic people are often highly narcissistic themselves, which in itself causes them to be exceedingly vulnerable to those who can see it, or they are codependent with a weak sense of self, low to no boundaries, and suffering from people pleaser syndrome and naivety. They have not yet realised that there are such people as the NPD types, and are only woken up to it after a painful experience or set of experiences that often alters them permanently, and usually for the better. Either way, the vast majority of people who regularly follow channels focused on narcissism are still quite vulnerable. They are and often become addicted and fixated on the content and those who produce it, just as they did with the narcissist and or narcissists they experienced in the past, and so become, in a kind of way, dependent on the content out there. The content producers, just like any other channel, is dependent on views, likes and subscriptions, which in themselves are all forms of attention. If this is successful, the channel can become a money-making venture, and in some cases become the producer's main source of income. This is where things change. Although videos made to make sense of narcissists and their techniques, etc., can offer a lot of comfort to those, including myself, who have suffered at the hands of such people, when the creator's channel has become a valuable source of income, they have to continue to produce content on the subject again and again. This alters the content and the motivation of the creator, and ultimately the entire subject is sensationalized. Creators with little to no training or experience will offer coaching and other ways to make money, such as videos that are not on the main channel, but that the viewers can pay to see. courses to purchase with promises of quick healing from childhood trauma and complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and of course merchandising. People's interest in the subject must now be maintained at all costs. The video title now becomes more important than the content, and things start to become repetitive, and the same video titles will be repeated over time, especially those which have garnered the most views. People who make videos can propagandize themselves as anything they deem as viable in terms of keeping and generating a following. Most points have been covered, but yet more interesting and dramatic titles are used to lure those who have become either addicted or are now being carried along by the regular content served up on a regular basis. The YouTube video creator is now in a competitive sales environment and therefore must be able to identify their main target audience and cater to them adequately. Observing trends in what seems to get views and attention and following them diligently. Creators will even start to gaslight their followers and viewers in order to buy their courses by attempting to convince them that they will not make any recovery otherwise, and that there is a lack of real help and support in terms of mental health services except from themselves and their highly priced courses. Video is a very powerful medium and can serve to show people who make them in a greater light, to almost a celebrity type level. The creator will maximize on this and start to venture sometimes into areas they have little to no knowledge of. This is when these people can and often do become deluded. They fluctuate from subject to subject in a desperate attempt to keep the channel alive and current. They can also conveniently block and silence anyone who has anything contrary to say about them or their content, and continue to pursue the attention of the die-hard and sycophantic type followers who make up the greater percentage of their subscriber base. This overdone approach begins to show narcissists and highly narcissistic people as far more powerful and foreboding than they actually are, but yet this drama that is created generates views. This now has a counterproductive effect in terms of communicating useful and effective information, and has now become more of a form of entertainment that for some only keeps them locked into constantly relating to their experience with their abuser, long past the point where they should have moved on. The creator has gone from relaying useful and pertinent information to having to keep generating content irrespective of the quality and relevance of it, and fueled by those followers who cannot or will not move on from the subject and get on with their lives. The subject is overcomplicated to produce a mystery around narcissism and keep it alive, which is a form of gaslighting in itself. Narcissism is not an elaborate disorder. It is based in quite predictable and basic behaviours, and once understood, the person who needs to heal has to eventually put the subject behind them, otherwise it will have the opposite effect of postponing their healing and prevent them from being able to close this chapter on a very educative yet painful experience with one or more of these destructive and abusive people.